there's 30,000 people that listen to I Just Need every day. There's these people that follow me on the internet, like whatever, like how many of them are in LA and how many of them would come to a free show?
Welcome to Audius's Behind the Beats, episode 12. In each episode, we'll be talking to musicians and DJs from all walks of life about their experiences in the music industry. From up-and-coming artists to established industry veterans, we'll be exploring the diverse and fascinating stories of the people behind the music. On today's episode, we're joined by innovative Web3 artist Daniel Allan. We'll be talking about Daniel's music background, breakthrough experiences with Web3, and what is coming up next for this incredible musician and producer. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by Behind the Beats. Let's go. What's up, Daniel? How are you?
Hello, I'm great. It's a beautiful Wednesday out here, right? It's Wednesday.
Yes. And where are you calling in from?
I'm here in Los Angeles. I've been here for
Amazing.
about 4 years now.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining the audio show Behind the Beats. It's very, very cool to have you here for so many reasons. I guess the best place to start is how did you firstly get into music? And secondly, how did you come across Web3 music?
Wow, crazy. I think music has been a big part of my life from the time I was a little kid. Like my mom, both my parents are immigrants from Ukraine, from the former Soviet Union, and my mom has like a PhD in musicology, so she's very like way better at music than I could ever even like dream about being, right? And then my dad met my mom because he would like steal like Beatles CDs and like play them on guitar and like pretend that they were like his own songs. And so it was always like a big part of my life growing up. Like my earliest childhood memory in terms of music was my dad giving me like Sergeant Pepper on CD.
Amazing.
And I was always like from like coming up in like a so a pretty like Soviet upbringing, right? You are always forced to play an instrument, and so for me that was piano. And so I started playing that when I was 7 years old, and I absolutely hated it. And what I would do is my mom, who's like so good at music, I didn't know how to read and how to read music. And so I would always ask her to start, like playing the songs so I could memorize them. And I would go to the recitals and play and have no idea when to turn the page. And then I would like add my own stuff to it, which is horrible to do in classical music. Like it's so frowned upon. But I think, started to have the inkling at that age that I wanted to, I guess, make my own music, and like kind of interpret it a little bit in my own way.
Yeah.
Um, and really after that, it's really presented itself in a lot of ways throughout my life. Like there was this weird inflection point where I hated my piano lessons, so I started playing tennis, and I like being an athlete was a really big part of my life too. But I started to feel after like 7-8 years of doing that, I started to feel the same burnout that I did from music,
Mm.
that I did in sports. And then weirdly, music became my escape in that. So I kind of rediscovered it when I was like in my early teens, and I started recording rappers in my local middle school.
Mhm.
Eventually, I started recording them in high school. I was like, "Where do you get your beats?" And they were like, "We rip them off YouTube." And that's actually where the whole that's actually where the whole making my own music thing really formulated
Ah,
itself. That's when I like downloaded like the pirated version of FL Studio and like all of that stuff. But yeah,
fantastic.
in terms of Web3 music, I think that there was from the time I was like 16, I was like, okay, I really want to do music. For 4 years, I dabbled in it, played tennis in college. And again, like started feeling burnt out. So I went back to music. And then at the age of 20, I very seriously was like, you know what? I'm going to go all in on music. I'm going to drop out of college. Like I'm going to really take this seriously and like find a way to do it. And what that looked like for me in 2020 was moving to Los Angeles. Right. And when I moved here, January 2020, pretty shitty time, like right before the pandemic to move here. But I kind of had it circled on the calendar. It was something that I always wanted to do. And, for a year and a half there, I was just really hustling, trying to find ways to make music my job, and a lot of that looked like as a producer, I was like DJing small shows for $50 here and there. I was like, mixing records for other people, mastering records for other people. I even did like a few short-term record deals that helped me pay my rent for a little bit. But yeah, after about a year and a half, I kind of felt like I was on a hamster wheel in a lot of ways, where I just didn't really know where to go from what I was doing. And like a lot of the really the music and the stuff that I was working on for Daniel Allan, I didn't really get the time to do because I was doing all these other things that were paying my rent, music related still. And the Daniel Allan stuff, even that I was doing specifically to sign like these short term deals that were like paying my rent. Um, and so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to find a way to ironically like sign to a major record label, because if I get X amount of money, I can live off of it and I can like really focus on Daniel Allan stuff and like really go all
Mm,
in on that, right? So I decided with the
sure.
last like remainder of money that I had in like my recording budget for the last project, I threw a show in my friend's backyard and I invited everyone that I could in music. Um
Wow.
Agents, people that I had been cold emailing when I was younger, like literally everyone that I could. And one of the people that I
Mm,
invited out had been DMing me for 6 months because he wanted to meet me. He wanted to hang out. His name's Cooper Turley, and who a lot of like Web3 music people are super familiar with, right? And
for sure.
I just invited him out to the show as like a gesture of like, hey, you've been really nice to me. You've always just been like a fan of my music, and like I invited him out to the show, and I remember after the show, I had like I said, the goal was to get this major record deal or whatever. I had like a few A&Rs come up to me. They're like, "Hey, we'd love to work together. You know, we'd love to see like what we can do here." And then Cooper also came up to me and he was like, "Hey, I'd love to find a way to work together." And I had absolutely no context on anything that he had done. I was just like, "Oh, like I didn't even realize you were in music," or it just really took me by surprise. And this is like March of 2021, I want to say. And so
Cool.
over that next month, I got like my first few like record label offers, and they didn't really pan out to what I wanted. And so like as a last resort, I went back to Cooper and was like, "Hey man, like I'm not really sure what you have in mind." And that's the first time
Mm,
that I heard anyone mention even like NFTs at the time. Um,
wow.
and he was like,
Okay.
"Oh, like you should drop NFTs." And my only kind of proxy or like frame of reference for what NFT was Beeple, really. Like that, I think that January Beeple had done 5,000 days, right? And I was
Yes.
that's really the only press that I had seen about it. And
Mm,
I was like, "Oh man, like I'm not a visual artist. Like I just kind of sit in my room and make beats." And he was like, "Yeah,
okay.
like my friend Jeremy runs this platform called Catalog where all you need is a cover art and a custom artwork." And so that's really where things started for me. I mean, March or April of 2021, I dropped my first music NFT, and the rest was history.
That's incredible. I just love you sharing your journey because it shows such a growth, but a realization of empowerment with like tech such as Web3. And it's really cool to hear that it was Cooper that introduced you. It sounds like to the Web3 world, and you were an early adopter in the space. Like as you said, you didn't have much of a frame of reference. It was like Beeple in the art
Mm-hmm.
world, but there weren't so many in the music world. And in fact, so much so that Billboard wrote a write up about you describing how you got your big break in Web3 music. So you were talking about it earlier. Can you share with us more about the first ever music NFT that you did and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, no, of course. I feel bad because whenever someone asks me like my story, I like feel like there's so many details, you know. um, but yeah, I would say like in the way that worked was Cooper had told me about Catalog. There were very few artists on the platform, and I was really there was kind of this pocket where I looked on the site and I was like, okay, no one has done a series before, so I want to go on and I really want to look through what a series looks like. And I decided to do this thing called the Drifter series, where I would take one of these, like a Fujifilm camera, and I would literally go into into the mountains, or like the Hollywood Hills, like from North. Like I was living in North Hollywood at the time, so it was like a 20-minute drive. And I would
Yeah.
pull over and I would literally plug my laptop into the Honda Accord, like make the song, airdrop it, and I would take a bunch of photos on this film camera. And I had no idea how to make an artwork. So I was like making it in like Google Slides, I think, just like as a collage of all the pictures. And I'll never forget, like at 9 a.m. I made the song. At 1 p.m. I went to like Sepulveda and Sherman Oaks and at like 35 millimeter, and I got the film developed. And then
Yeah.
at 5 p.m. I had sold my first NFT, like a one of one, to a stranger that I had never met before. And
That's
I think that like fundamentally flipped my world upside down, and it flipped like my understanding of, I think, just music being consumed as an art form upside down. I think for the
mm,
first time, I wasn't trying to blow up on TikTok. I wasn't trying to, spend all these like basically take a loan out from a record label to like create some sort of shot in the dark marketing campaign against my music to get paid for it. It was just
mm,
kind of this net new way of consumption that was like a very akin to like fine art, you know what I mean? And
mm,
just something that had never really existed in the music landscape. And so like my first thought after selling it was like, holy shit, I'm going to do that again. Right. And so a couple days later, I did the same thing. And then by the end of the month, I had sold, 5 or 6 of them, and
Amazing.
was by far the most money that I had ever made off music within a month by like a wide margin. But I think beyond that, I remember I went back to Cooper. I was like, listen, man, I don't know what you have in mind. Like, but I'm down. Like, I'm down to like figure it out and work together on it. And he was and I started coming to him with like ideas of what I wanted to do for Overstimulated, which Time eventually did a piece on.
Mm,
And I remember like
mm,
that entire summer was me trying to, summer of 2021 was me fast tracking my entire like on-chain experience, because I realized very quickly that I was the stupidest person like in every room that I got into. And while I still wanted to keep things that way, um, I wanted to at least fast track and be able to have like somewhat conversations with these people where I didn't feel like it was a total
mm,
waste of their time. So like, I remember I would go to like Cooper's tweets, and I would go to who's liking them. And as long as it said like Ethereum since 2014, Ethereum since 2017, like whatever in their bio, I would just DM them and be like, hey, like I have no idea what you do, but it says Ethereum in your bio. Can I have 5 minutes to talk to you? And like
mm,
when I was in college, like I would do this thing where I would send 5 cold emails every single day, right?
mm,
And the rate was very simple. Is I would send out 35 emails a week, and like almost to a T every week, I'd get like 30 no responses,
mm,
5 responses. 3 of them would be a no, one would be a maybe, and one would be a yes. And yes might mean anything from like taking a phone call to me to like sending me stems to remix or whatever. But I noticed that like at that pace, by the end of every year, there are like 50 people that I know in music. And I kind of took the same approach that like summer of 2021, with fast tracking my way onto like into Web3 and like into music NFTs. It was like, listen, I'm really far behind, but I'm super down to do this thing where I reach out to people. And that's like one thing that I'll give myself a little credit for.
I think you should give yourself a lot of credit, and you're definitely not behind. You're an innovator. You're at the forefront, and you didn't have much of a frame of reference. And just backtracking earlier to what you said about being the stupidest person in the room. Well, there's something to be said though about your humbleness with that, because it takes artists to realize that they're surrounding themselves with other innovators in the space, whether they're maybe not musicians, but like on the business side of things, like Cooper, as you were saying, because that's how you build really strong teams to take things a step further. And so my next question for you, which relates to what we're saying, is why do you believe Web3 decentralized music, such as NFTs, are so empowering for artists versus the traditional Web2 hierarchy in the music industry?
I think to answer that question, you have to have an understanding of what the traditional music industry and what making it in the traditional music industry looks like, right? I think that there is the way that like a lot of if you ask an artist like what they do, like what making it, I'm still holding this camera. Hold on, let me put this down. If you ask artists what making it in the music industry looks like, a lot of them might classify it as like signing a record deal. I think that that's like a pretty vast majority. It's a pretty safe bet to say that.
Mm,
And what a record deal looks like is, we'll use round numbers here. You get, let's say, a $100,000 loan, right, from
mm,
a label. And the terms of that agreement are you get like X amount of you sign X amount of songs to them, right?
yeah.
And you do it on an 80-20 split, 80 in favor of the label.
Mm,
And you only start to see 20% or 20 cents on the dollar once your share is
profit.
recouped, meaning once you make $500,000 for the song, you start to see 20 cents on every dollar. Before that, you don't see anything. And
Mm,
I think that outside of the financial structures that Web3 offers, I think that which I think is abundantly clear with that example, you when you release music, you really there's no tool for artists to be able to know who their fans
mm,
are. Like there's you like I get at the end of the year the Spotify Wrap thing. That's like you were in X
yeah.
amount of people's like number one favorite artist or top 5 favorite artists or whatever. Unless they're like going out of their way to like tag me on their story and like do all of these things, because I'm like a hawk on the internet, like trying to find that kind of stuff and like trying to like I'm like kind of a data nerd in like a weird way as an artist. And like
That's awesome.
and they the only like 0.0001% of that group, which is already a really small group of like my general listenership, are actually going to go out of their way to post it on their story and to actually tag me so that I can see it. Whereas like
Mm,
on chain, like I'm able to see any single person that ever contributes to anything that I put up, and I'm able to have their wallet address. Most of the time, their wallet address via their ENS is like their Twitter handle, or you can track it down like very, very quickly. And you can like do a little bit of wallet stalking if you totally have to really figure it out. But like a lot of the times, they make it pretty clear who they are. And so the funnel becomes a lot smaller. Like it becomes a lot more simple to be able to bring people into your ecosystem and to actually have a little bit more of a conversation with them, And that's just like, you know, foreign, in a lot of ways to the traditional music industry.
It's very disruptive, but as we're saying, very empowering. I saw a tweet that you did lately that you raised, well, it was this year, that you raised a significant amount of seed capital for your next stage of your career. Our listeners and viewers would just love to hear more about this. Congratulations. It's amazing that you're reinventing business models for artists and making it artist centric. So, can you share more about this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started making money off of music NFTs, that was like the first time that I started making any kind of money off my career. And so what most of that looked like was, well, to put it in perspective, my first year in Los Angeles, I made $8,000. And so I was like splitting my time between like sleeping in my car and like sleeping on friends' floors and like really trying to make it work. And so for the first time, I was able to make a living that was enough to be able to like have, an apartment that was like
Mm.
decent to live in. Because my first place I lived was like with Russian fugitives here. It was crazy. It's like a wild story. But like, I think that what a lot of that looked like was the money that I was making was going towards my rent, and then everything else was going towards like I need a laptop to actually make music because my laptop was on its last legs, and a lot of that. And I think that I ran experiments in the past where I would raise a little bit of money and try to put it into my project, but I also didn't have like more of like
Mm,
a Web2 infrastructure around me, and so a lot of it was me shooting darts, trying to
mm,
like hope that this marketing campaign or this is like really with no digital marketing experience was like going to work. And
yes.
after I think with time, like I was able to bring on a team, and I was able to, like, outside of Cooper as well, who's obviously still a really big part of my team. But just people, like, I was able to bring an agent. I signed with CAA that's like helping me get like more festival bookings, and then I met my manager and whatnot. So like as
Mm,
those things started to come together, I was like, you know what, like I want to be able to provide some sort of like a resource pool for them to be able to use to further my career because it's just not my expertise. And I think that at the
mm,
same time, like I wanted to, and I think maybe this is the more important bit, like I wanted to inspire other artists to kind of say, look, there is an alternative, like there's an alternative to having to kind of take a bet on signing your life away. You know what I mean? And like I really treat like Daniel Allan like it's, I mean, the name of the company like that I structured it as like it's basically a C corp called Daniel Allan Entertainment, and under that there's my my masters, my publishing, my
mm.
touring, and like my on chain revenue,
Wow.
and I which are all like their own LLCs. But the reason that I did that is like, look, you can totally just treat yourself as a company, and to me, I guess it kind of just was a pretty straightforward way of thinking about it. And maybe it's because like I think to an extent I am somewhat entrepreneurial relative to other
Mm,
artists. Maybe not relative to other business people by any stretch of the imagination, but to other artists, I would say like maybe that's the case because I'm not really like the stereotypical artist that maybe stays up till like 5 every morning and like kind of works on
mm,
music. Like I live a pretty normal life, you know what I mean? But I like when I was in college, I would spend a lot of time listening to like entrepreneurial podcasts, like How I Built This with Guy Raz, and
awesome.
just a bunch of those styles podcast. I'm just a big podcast listener in general, and I think in one way or another that wired me to, I guess, always be on the lookout for alternatives and treat my career pretty
Mm.
entrepreneurially. Um, so yeah.
That's cool. Wow. Yeah, I think to make it, especially in the Web3 space, you have to have an entrepreneurial spirit. So, congratulations. That's very cool what you're doing and like as a business model. And I think a lot of artists will look to that, as a frame of reference, ironically, for their how they approach their career because Web3 really can be, a launch pad, like you said. And speaking of, entrepreneurial spirit, it is a large part about community and fostering that relationship with your collectors. And I saw a Billboard article describing that you could sometimes have, 14-hour work days on Discord, and spending quite a lot of time in platforms like Discord or maybe Twitter Spaces. I'd love to hear more about that process and what platforms you use for engaging your Web3 community.
I think that it's changed quite a bit over time. I think that in that early era, it was a lot of Discord, and I think over time it kind of bred itself into like a gilded telegram. And I think that right now I'm able to bring on a team that's able to help me a little bit with it. And so a lot of
Mm.
that looks like still gilded telegrams, but also a little bit of just like Twitter and across social media. I think that it's been really cool to see like a lot of people that were traditionally on chain start to even go a little bit off chain and hop onto platforms where I'm having a little bit more success. And I'm able to kind of still carry those relationships over, which I think has been really interesting for me because these are people that I was in the trenches with in Discord. Like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
they might have purchased like my first sound NFT, and now we're able to kind of talk a lot cross platform. So I don't know that there's necessarily like a central
Mm.
place. I think in terms of like updates, like sure I'm going to be
Mm.
sending stuff in my Telegram, but I think really a lot of it has kind of almost grown to like be somewhat of a friend group, I would say. So yeah, that's been really nice to see.
That's cool. What you've just illustrated is that you are the platform. The artist is becoming the platform if they, can establish that relationship and interoperate between different forms of communication. And obviously, we love you here at Audius, and we all share similar insights about the power of Web3 and decentralized music. So, could you share with everybody how did you first discover Audius, and what is your favorite thing about the Audius platform?
To be honest, I want to say Cooper put it on my radar years ago. To me, the way that I treat audios is I'm able to it almost in a lot of ways like I came up getting into music in the early SoundCloud days, like in the very early where you don't really have to think too much about like how curated you want your music to be. Like I think that like the era of Spotify and DSPs, while it solved a lot of problems for artists, there's like an argument to be made if it's like a net negative or net positive for
Mm,
creativity at large.
mm,
And I think that that's Audius to me in the past few years has been, I think, what SoundCloud was as an era to a lot of other people. And I mean that comparison
mm,
like very respectfully because SoundCloud, I think, was a very cultural landmark in my upbringing. But that's kind of
mm,
like how I view it. Like I just dropped a song on Audius that only lives on Audius, and like whoever's
mhm,
like meant to see it as an Easter egg out of my fans is gonna know to go there. And I think that I find that interesting. I think that as someone who does shit like on Web3, like I
mm.
really like using tech for like Easter egg moments. Like I think
Yes.
like this Friday, I'm doing a release party at my house, right? And I'm literally throwing it in my backyard, and I'm making 25 custom lanyards that have like IYK chips, which is like a digital company for those of you that don't know. Um,
Yeah.
and I want to have like my next body of work ready by Friday so that like they can as Easter egg like fans have that. And I try to find things in my workflow that can really that people who are really in the weeds that are like Reddit kids that are like really like chronically internet kids that like want to find the common thread between my projects and sometimes know what my music means more than I do at the time and like try to like sometimes they create definition to it that I wouldn't have even otherwise come to that conclusion myself. That's where I think like an Audius plugs in for me is like a lot of
Mm,
it feels like a little bit more like freeing in terms of what I post on there. Whereas SoundCloud I think
mm.
is kind of like my like random flips or whatever, like random Travis Scott flips and shit like that. Where Audius to me is kind of like the originals that while I use it as a tool to supplement what's already out, it's also a place to do some
Mm.
of those Easter egg online moments.
Yeah, that's really cool how you put it. Very eloquent Easter egg moments. It's almost I kind of call it like the cozy web, like finding pockets of the decentralized web to foster community and have those moments, like you said, and reward mechanisms. So obviously, Audius, we recently added new monetization features where Audius users can now add an extra payment to support their favorite artists, which we call unlockable content as an added incentive. And you were one of 40 artists that are part of this initial launch. Is there anything you would like to share in terms of your involvement with this launch and how you plan to leverage this technology with your fans?
I think it's really interesting because every on-chain platform has it's a pretty segmented while it's a small community like I think people kind of choose sides in a way and I think that it's really interesting to be able to tap into a like a fan base I would say that a platform has like I think that
Mm,
Audius might have its own like quote unquote fan base or user base if you want to call it like relative like independent of a SoundCloud independent of a sound independent of a Zora and
mm,
I think that a lot of the lessons that I've learned like on chain in the past couple of years has given me a little bit more of like a framework or like a hierarchical structure to be able to reach out to people. And so it's interesting to like approach for the most part as I've been looking through who's been like participating in my drop. it's all new people, you know what I mean? Whereas like a lot of the times, like the drop that I'm doing on my own sites or whatever, like I have
Yeah.
somewhat of an understanding of like the split will be like new people to like people that have
Mm.
been in my ecosystem. And it's just an exciting prospect to like, I guess, capture a little bit more of a new user base and use some of the tricks, use some of the like mechanisms I've learned in the past few years to foster it.
Totally. Well, look, you have something very exciting coming out. You have an EP, Duality. So, congratulations. I feel like we should talk about the
Thank you.
music now. So, can you tell us more about this EP and what we can expect?
Yeah. Wow. Duality is it's really exciting to be talking about it this close to it coming out, because I think I've
Mm.
had a lot of time to sit with it. I've had a lot of time to play shows with it, which has never really happened. Like it's never really been like I've only recently started playing like quite a few shows, and it's really been interesting to like play songs and adjust them a little bit based on like what crowds like and whatnot.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was just kind of like I'm just gonna hope that this works. But I think that the biggest thing about what duality means for me is, it's kind of twofold, right? Intentionally, where I think that the pretty clear one is that I've always lived these very two different lives. Like I like living a life on chain, like as like a businessman, as like an entrepreneur, as the CEO of, Daniel Allan Entertainment, if that's like the way to think about it, is a
Mm.
very different like side of my brain than Daniel Allan, like the artist. You know what I mean? Like
Tot-
a lot of the things that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, like as a founder, is like very I always forget the difference between right brain, left brain, but whichever one is the analytical one. I think that's right brain, right? Am I wrong? Is
Yes,
that right? So
I
like
think.
yeah, so let's just assume that that's right. But the analytical, I guess, like right brain is very businessy, very much in that world. Like left brain, Daniel is like it's like an alter ego. Like it's a
Mm.
like a wildly different human being. Like I manically make music. I'm like chugging coffee. I'm like running around my studio dancing. Like you know what I mean? Like it's just like it's a totally different interpretation of a person. And so I think that
Mm.
that's what that's felt like to me. And I think that in terms of music that I've put out, I think that it's my first time really coming out as like an electronic act. I think that the past couple of years of me putting out music has been
Mm.
almost like a public SoundCloud playlist that lives on DSPs. It's like, oh, like I'm interested in indie music. I'm gonna do that. I'm interested
Mm.
in rap music. So me and Rio Cragen are gonna do like a collaborative EP. But even like those songs, like Criteria, which was my EP with Rio, was like an electronically produced rap project. Glass House, which was an EP I dropped last summer, was like an electronically produced alternative project. But I
Mm.
kind of got like thrown into like the live show circuit, and kind of was sitting there like, damn, I don't really have that much of my own electronic music that really works in like a club atmosphere that I can play at
Mm.
festivals or clubs or whatever. And so that's
Mm.
really what a lot of this project has been, and like the reactions to it have really been wildly overwhelming. Like last night, San Holo and Madion did like a headline set in China, and they played two of my songs back to back. And those are two people that are like I never really saw myself as like one of those DJs or artists that
Mm.
that people could play their songs out, which is it's I could only really hope for that, you know what I mean? But it's really
Amazing.
cool that I guess I found a pocket, or I'm starting to find a little bit of a pocket in my music that other DJs can really give me a cosign and like play that at festivals, play that at shows. And these are like idols to me, you know what I mean? Like these are like some of my favorite like artists who are like absolutely like formative in like the like my taste as like a high school kid, you know what I mean? And so
Amazing.
I think that duality is really, it touches on like the balance of my personal life, like I mentioned, but it's also me coming out and being like, listen, like I'm really inspired by electronic music, and I'm really self curating this entire project. Like,
Mm.
I don't know. It's definitely it's been like the most every project I put out is like a baby to me. You know what I mean? But I think that this one feels like particularly special because I've just had the most personal breakthroughs in the process of working on this project. Like one anecdote I'll give you like is
Mm.
I I remember in July, I thought that I had the project done, and so
Mm.
I went to a friend's house who's a producer. I won't say his name, but he's a producer that I really really look up to. And if you know anything about my music, you know that like I really look up to him in a lot of ways. And
Mm.
I went to his house, and I played like a selection of like 30 demos for him, of
Mm.
which like I kind of had an idea of which like 8 to 10 would maybe be the project at the time.
Mm.
And he kind of looks at me. He's like, "Bro, I get that you're good. Stop trying to show me that you're good." And really what that meant to me was like I was a lot of the music that I was making was like in trying to make pure whatever electronic music was I was making
Mm,
music for producers, and I've realized that the songs that have
mm.
done the best off of my project so far are the songs that I made in literally 15 minutes or 20 minutes or one session. And
Wow. Mm,
my biggest breakthrough with that has been like, you how long you spend on a song doesn't at all have a correlation with how good the song is. In fact, I would
right.
say like sometimes if there is a correlation, it's like an inverse relationship where like the shorter time you spend on the song, like the better it is because there's something freeing about like the initial idea or not overthinking it. And I think that duality to me, if I were to like tie it up with a nice bow, is like kind of my very public way of getting over overthinking.
That's so cool and so layered, and I'll call it multi-dimensional. So we just love hearing these stories behind the why, from the title to all the stories behind the music. So congratulations, it's very exciting. In fact, I think we're going to be playing one of the songs from your EP. I Just Need. Before we play it, is there anything you'd like to share about this song?
Yes, actually. Normally I would just be like, no, play it, let's hear it. I Just Need is a song that I made with Lyra in 15 minutes. And she was about to leave for dinner. She airdropped me a vocal, and it's the very first thing that came to mind. And then she left for dinner, and I put this song out, and it is to me, I think, like I said, every song's a baby. This is, I think, the favorite song I've ever made. And a lot of it comes from, I've gotten so many of my favorite artists to reach out to specifically to me when I put this song out.
Mm,
Like a lot of times people will be like, "Hey, like I like it," but a lot of the
mm,
artists that I really look up to, they hit me up and they're like, "Hey, man, this is like really special," and I don't really
mm.
know what it is about the song that so many like. It's really been like, I guess, the quote unquote most viral moment I've had in my entire career with this song. But I'm really grateful for it. It's definitely this is like I'm gonna look back on this song in 10 years and be like, wow, I'm still really proud of it.
It is a really sick song. And in fact, it's like you're co-creating with the universe. The fact that you made that in 15 minutes just blows my mind. So I'm excited. Let's play it.
I just need you now. I just I just
Damn, that is such a vibe. Such a vibe.
Oh man, I'm still so proud of that
I
song.
love it. And the vocals are so cool. Like just over that drop, like the way they're chopped and all of that. It's so cool, man.
Thank you. Yeah, Lyra, the girl who features on it. Shout out to Lyra, wildly talented girl. Weirdly, I talk about this. Me and her are really similar. Cause she used to be like a product designer at Meta, and she was very much like so. She's way smarter than me. Like by like leaps and bounds. But she's like one of the like only other few artists that we kind of like joke with each other and we like connect over both of us having those two modes, and like how like she can be very entrepreneurial. She started a bunch of companies in college and then had like a
Mm.
real like adult job that I that I never had. And so yeah, me and her always joke about that. So it's really a beautiful thing that we got to experience the song together and continue to experience it every day with like all the messages and love that we get on it.
Amazing. There's a real synergy there. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to now pivot to some other cool NFT projects you've done, like Criteria, which is an 8-track project we were speaking about earlier with Rio Cragen. So the collection, as you know, consists of 2,500 editions and activations, across sound, arpeggio, etc. So can you tell us more about that NFT project? I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Rio is someone that I was that like working with him on that project was a very like pinch me moment for sure. Because he's someone that I would put Flume in like the top five, excuse me, like buckets of or like the top five artists that in terms of people that have inspired me. He's the first person I ever saw live at a show, and in
Mm,
2019, Flume and Rio put out an EP together, and I genuinely became such a like really a fan of his music. Like I followed him everywhere, like on his socials, and I just was following his journey like far after the Flume stuff, and I went into his back catalog before the Flume stuff. So just on a musical level, I'm very fortunate to have worked on that project with him. He was literally at my house yesterday. He's like my brother. He's one of my best friends, and he he was also one of the first people that gave me confidence. He like looked at me and he's like, you could do rap shit. Like if you really want to make rap music and like produce for other people, like and do, which is like also a really big part of my life right now. It's like maybe not Daniel Allan stuff, but it's stuff that I produce as Daniel. And I'm just very grateful for that like creative part of my life. He was one of the first people that gave me like the confidence to really like, as someone who like culturally has never really fit into hip hop, to find an angle on it that felt like honest to me and didn't feel like it overstepped any boundaries, like felt really good. So I'm really grateful for that project musically. Um, I think I think that in terms of what we did on chain, like our entire thought process with that was that we Rio is someone that, you know, was signed to like, you know, a major label back in the day and had really seen the ins and outs of the music industry in a way that I maybe just now I'm starting to get around to, but he's old, you know, he's a little older than me, like not to date him. You know what I mean? I'm just saying like he's had a lot more experience than me in music. And from a very young age too. Like I mean he signed his first record deal, I think he was like 21 years old, you know. And he so he was very familiar with like a rollout and how rollouts should work, like from creative direction to music videos to, you know, like all of those kind of components. I was like, you know what, like there's this like pool of on-chain resources, right? Why don't we just take a rollout and just only let it live on chain? So like we didn't play any shows with the project, but we like quote unquote played a show and on Cyber. Like we didn't drop any sample packs on my website or any sample packs on Splice, but we dropped a sample pack on Arpeggi, right? And so a lot of what we were like, we didn't drop a vinyl, but we did a 2,500 piece collection on sound. And so that's like kind of creatively, I think where our heads were at, is to take a rollout that we know traditionally exists and make one that's like 100% Web3 native, you know?
Yeah. But that's really cool because it gives like a sense of exclusivity as well, and like what an artist to work with and like yourself. So I just love hearing these stories. In fact, speaking of stories, the Chainsmokers recently brought you out on stage to perform. That is so dope. I'd love to hear more about that and what your live shows are like.
Oh my God, man. I cannot say enough about those guys. I really like, I almost get emotional thinking about them because I have a relationship. I have a much closer, so Chainsmokers are two guys, Alex and Drew. I have a very close or a pretty close relationship with Alex. I don't want to say very close, but pretty close. Like we talk. I only met Drew at that show, but I mean, the way that they talk to me is it's less about what they say and more about how they say it. Like they're one of the biggest artists in the world, and they'll text me back within 1 minute, and
Wow.
it really makes me feel like I feel like a lot of the times like you don't want to meet your idols or you don't want to meet, you know, like that because you know like maybe they're not who you think they are. Like I think they've exceeded my expectations by every single margin. Like I remember I went up to Drew 30 minutes before they went on stage. Like I opened up for them at the Shoreline Amphitheater in San Francisco. It was like a 22,000 person venue. I mean, by far the biggest venue I've ever played.
Amazing.
And like I come off stage, and Alex is just like, dude, like you killed it. Like he was like there to like tell me. It's like, you know what I mean? Like it's like, why are you here right now? You know, you don't play for another like 3 hours, you know, like you should be like in your hotel room drinking tea, and just stuff like that really is wild
Yeah.
to me and goes such a long way. And Drew, I remember like Drew 30 minutes before they went on, I was like, hey man, like I just wanted to say hi. I'm Daniel. Like you know, I played second today, whatever. And he was like, bro, like, you know, I'm such a fan. Like the crowd looked like they were having such a good time. Thank you so much for being here. I'm like, you're thanking me? Like that's like wild. You know, like that's like an absurd thing. You know, like I'm here to like basically like like kiss your feet and just be like, bro, like thank you for giving me a shot. Thank you for having me. And he's like just front running me and saying thank you. You know what I mean? So I just think with them in general, I like, I mean, I have a little bit of a history with them. Like their manager 7 years ago was the first person, like, you know how I was saying, like I was sending cold emails back, like
Yeah.
back in the day, their manager was the first person that responded,
Wow.
back
That's
in the
so
day. And
cool.
he, way before he even had a reason to, but he gave me the time of day. And,
Yeah.
he was like the first guy that like gave me a shot and even was
Amazing.
even hopped on the phone with me and talked to me. And so, I mean, the show was, in terms of the show, it was my favorite show that I ever played. I think I just felt like I've matured a lot as a performer in the past, in the past like 6 months of playing shows, past year of playing shows. And like, I'm really proud of it, but it's honestly less about me. Like, I think it's more about just how they treated me and like the impression that they left me with about like how just incredible of
Mm.
people they are. I really, I could talk all day about their whole team, like, yeah, it's just unbelievable.
I love all the love that's going around here, but it's so true to foster this support network, right, between your peers, right, other artists that are performing. It's a really beautiful thing to hear. In fact, when you're performing live, what is your favorite thing? And do you have any cool stories you can share or any funny stories?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I I love performing. I've really come around to I've learned like how I was saying with duality, there's like two sides of me. I think that you really can't be analytical at all in a lot of ways when it comes to shows. Like you really have to go out there and like kind of be like your full creative self. But I guess I'll rescind that to an extent. Like you have to in a way you do have to be out there and you have to be like kind of a salesperson in a way. So like what that looks like is if you can pinpoint like two or three people that are like like dancing, like I opened for them, you know what I mean? So it's like
Mm.
no one is really there to see me. Like they're, maybe a few people are, but for the most part, it's obviously chain smokers, right?
Yeah.
Um, and but if I notice like two or three people dancing, like I will like shout them out. Like I'll like be on the microphone. Like I played a Halloween show and with them, and so they were dressed up as ketchup and mustard. So I was like talking to ketchup and mustard like the whole time. But then
Oh my
they got
goodness.
their like five or six friends around them to start dancing, and then they got the people next to them to start. And eventually there was this whole like kind of like mini mosh pit that I formed from like pinpointing those couple of people. But one thing I really try to do in my shows, and I learned this from San Holo, who's also like a big brother to me, like,
Mm.
is I take like 45 seconds or like I take a minute out of every show to just talk. Like I literally, like the biggest kind of sin you could do as a DJ traditionally is to turn off the music.
Right.
But I'll take a minute out of every show and just talk about how fucking objectively wild it is that this is like what I do. But also like I talk about how like my biggest thing is like when I was 16 years old, like I've stumbled into a music festival. It was Lollapalooza in Chicago, and I saw someone play, and I just felt like it changed my life. Like I felt so inspired to like go do something that speaks to me, and I've been so fortunate to make it my life. But I really don't think that I'm like this super special person. Like I think that I kind of just thought about it kind of logically. I was like, you know what? Like it's not wild to like go and try this thing because life is short and like this is like really what I care
Mhm.
about doing. And I try to get that message across when I talk to people at shows. It's like if I can walk away and there's like a 16-year-old Daniel in the crowd that is like they might be at their first show. Even if I don't have that much reach and I'm not as big as the Chainsmokers and I don't have all those things, that doesn't mean that I can't like impact anyone. And so like I really try to
Mm.
take a minute out of every show to like express like how thankful I am to be there, but also to be like, yo, like you can go do this shit and like you can go because like I have no reason to. I grew up with my background, like I grew up to immigrant parents, like we were like trying to like put food on the
Mm.
table and stuff, and like I found a way to make this my life, and like so can you, you know. So I that's like the most important I think part of my shows as of recent.
That is really wholesome. I just love that. And I think a lot of people go to shows not just for the music, but for two other things. Community connection as one thing, and then the thing is to be inspired. Like as you said, there could be another Daniel in the audience. So thank you for sharing that. That's really, really wholesome. So let's now pivot back to your EP. I'd love to play another song from your EP. It's called Elysian Park or Elysian Park. Is there anything you'd like to share about this song before we play it?
Yeah, I think whoever listens to this podcast, please send me a voice message on Instagram saying if it's Elysian Park or Elysian Park because I like genuinely have no idea. And the chorus says we could trip on psychedelics in Elysian Park. I first of all, I don't really do psychedelics like that. But second of all, she says Elysian Park. So yeah, someone hit me up and let me know because I genuinely don't know what the right answer is. That's all I have to say about this song.
I think everyone's curious now, so let's, without further ado, play the song.
Side effects. I'm caught up picking sides again. Tell my friends to tell your friends, or I'm right, but I don't want the side effects. Michael, I'm blocking on with text, your hair was up. No, it's been a minute, but almost too touch. We could trip on psychedelics and illusion park. Watch the sun go down before I get home. We could trip on psychedelics and illusion park. Watch the sun go down before I get home. Side effects, I'm staying up and sleeping in. I'm lying, no offense again, and I'm tired of dealing with the side effects. Hide in the backseat, spirits and OCD, straight my OCD. Hide in the backseat, over you, over you. I just might go, I'm blocking, I'm with text, your hair was up. No, it's been a minute, but almost too touch. We could trip on psychedelics and illusion park. Watch the sun go down and fall back in love. Trip on psychedelics and we could trip on psychedelics and illusion park. Watch the sun go down and fall back in love. Hide in the backseat, spirits and OCD, straight my OCD. Hide in the backseat, over you, over you. I just might go.
That was awesome. Very trippy. I love it.
Thanks. Sorry, I muted myself.
So you have an EP coming out, very exciting, and you got a release party. Do you want to share more about how we can tune in to this release party?
Yes, I need to set up a live stream. So if you don't already follow me on socials, I'm most active on Instagram right now, which is Daniel Allan Music. But I will be setting up some sort of a live stream. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but me and my team will figure it out. If you are in Los Angeles, you are more than welcome to come to the party. There's a Partiful link in my Instagram bio. The whole thought process with doing this is,
Mm.
I think a lot of my career has predicated itself on me taking things into my own hands. And it's really hard to play shows. Like
Mm.
it's a very competitive landscape. A lot of the electronic music scene, as deserving as they are, and I don't want to take anything, so I want to be very careful with how I word this. A lot of the like festival system is like somewhat grandfathered in because they're just obviously like iconic, legendary acts that, I want to be really sensitive with how I word this, that just kind of are always going to be in there. So there's this kind of very competitive landscape in terms of the
Mm.
people that are trying to break through. And that has to do with like regular shows, festivals, like anything.
Mm.
And we were thinking about like, okay, like how can we do this at a venue, whatever, for the release party? And then I was like, you know what? Like, I have a backyard, and
Yeah.
like so many of my favorite artists, like when Steve Aoki went to UCSD, I think he went to. I remember
Mm.
like in his documentary, he was talking about how he would just pack out his like apartment and like throw
Yeah.
basically like for him it was like heavy metal shows because he was like built different like that. But like he would literally like pack out his living room and just like go crazy with it and like start to create a little bit of a buzz that way. And Skrillex did that with Ausla in like the early days. I don't know if it was his living room, but he would do like these underground kind of like no one knew, like pack out small places. And yeah, that's kind of the same thought process I had here. Is what, like there's 30,000 people that listen to I Just Need every day. There's these people that follow me on the internet, like whatever. Like how many of them are in LA, and how many of them would come to a free show? Like, I'm not going to charge money to throw a show at my house. So like, because I don't have any overhead. So why would I like?
Mm.
Why would I like punish someone that wants to like hear me live? You know what I mean? And so like that's the entire thought process with this is like I have a house, I'm going to do it in my backyard, and I'm going to make it free for everyone. And like the only requirement is that you have to just dance and like electronic music, and like that's it, or like whatever kind of music. Because I'm going to play like I'm just going to DJ, and like I'm going to have my friends come DJ, and it'll just be a cool night.
That is so dope, and I feel like not enough artists do that these days. I mean, because it's such a cool way to engage your fans and make it, I know, feel more intimate, and really feel a part of something truly special, especially when you're dropping like a new body of music. So, congratulations! That whole strategy is really dope.
We'll see. Don't congratulate me yet. Maybe it just goes terribly. No. We'll see.
Hope though. And so look, we're now going to conclude to the final segment of the show. And what we do is a rapid fire round of questions, followed by some golden nugget advice for our audience community. So are you ready for the rapid fire?
Whew. Hold on, let me get a sip of this coffee. All right, let's do it. I've never done rapid fire on any podcast before, so this is gonna be tricky, but I'm ready.
We'll see. Okay, Discord or Twitter Spaces?
Twitter Spaces.
Mixing on speakers or headphones?
Headphones every time, no question.
Italian food or Japanese food?
Oh, that's the one. Italian food, but if you're in Japan, specifically Japanese food, I'm sorry.
It's cool. I'll let that slide. Xbox or PlayStation?
PlayStation. I've always been a PS3 kid.
Yeah, same. VR or AR?
VR.
Cool. Club shows or festivals?
Oh God, that's another dagger just in my chest. Festival shows win out by a little bit, but if that were rephrased to intimate shows or festivals, I would have maybe taken intimate shows.
Cool. If you could remix any song, what would it be and why?
Skrillex, Scary Monsters, and Nice Sprites. My first start in electronic music.
Wow, I can't wait to hear that. I have to hear that. That's so cool. Okay, next question. You are on a desert island. You can only take 3 musical items with you besides your computer to create music. What are those 3 items?
Oh my God, I'm the most laptop producer of all time. So I would say headphones, like a little marimba, like kalimba thing, and one of those like Zoom recorders, like that you can like just sample stuff with on the island for sure. Because I'm way more sampley and in the computer than I am like like a keyboard or whatever.
Love it. Very contextually appropriate to being on a desert island. Okay, finally, what advice do you have for up-and-coming artists that are starting their careers and are looking to produce their own records, perform live, and even delve into Web3 music, such as NFTs?
I think that you have to decrease the amount of time between having an idea, like a big or small, in your head, and then you actually acting on that idea. I think that if I would have been 16 years old and was like, hey, I want to play Lollapalooza, or I want to do all of these things, and I would have started thinking about all of the logistics and all of the how hard it is to get an agent and do all of this stuff, I probably wouldn't be here today. I think that there's really a lot of beauty in being naive, and I think being naive is a result of just acting almost at times faster than you can process. And so I think that the most important thing, at least for me, was decreasing that gap. And then outside of that, just being really consistent and like trying to make a little bit of music every day and like be okay with making bad songs. Like I still don't think I'm that good, but like I make so many bad songs all the time, but I'm always writing music. And I think in a lot of ways, music is just a really long thing, and you would be surprised how much you can get done by just committing for 6 months. I mean, like 6 months, I'm gonna be working on like a song every day. I'm gonna spend 30 minutes a day. I'm gonna spend an hour a day just like trying to make an idea. And you might not realize it in the first week. You might not realize it in the first month, but you'll look back at 6 months and be like, damn, like I've really come a long way. Like my music I've learned how to write chords better. Like my arrangement makes more sense. Like my drums sound cleaner. And that only compounds over time, So I think just kind of those two things, just like kind of get into it. Don't think too much, but also like be consistent and like try to make it a priority in your life, make it a priority to, I'm not saying the only priority, because there's so many other things that are, I think, more important than music, or just as important as music. But yeah, make it a priority to like create a little bit and think about life through a creative lens. Cause it'll only reflect itself better in your music.
That's really good advice. Thank you so much for sharing and for joining us today on the show.
Of course. Thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
So much fun, and we learned so much, so thank you.
Sweet.
That's a wrap for Audius Behind the Beats. We'll be dropping the social handles and links for Daniel Allan in the comments and description. Until next time, keep vibing, keep thriving, and keep creating. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one. Behind the Beats is a production of Audius Music. This episode was hosted by me, Sam McFly, with editing by Julian Blythe and production assistance from Sierra Graves. Our executive producers are Julian Baker and Michael Cullen.